Okay. All right. So Greg can't join us, but he did share the thought for the day. So since October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the thought for the day is that cancer is so limited. It cannot cripple love. It cannot shatter hope. It cannot corrode faith. It cannot destroy peace. It cannot kill friendship. It cannot suppress memories. It cannot silence courage. It cannot invade the soul. It cannot steal eternal life. And it cannot conquer the spirit. So, good thought. My wife's a breast cancer survivor, as was my mom. So, had to deal with its ugliness. My dad died of lung cancer. So, it's a tough thing to deal with. I'll go ahead and make the club announcements. In 2015, we revitalized our external grant program to fund community organizations that serve youth through creative and innovative programming. Since then, we have provided 100 grants totaling more than $265,000 to 56 organizations in central Indiana, impacting more than 33,000 youth. This year's team, led by Bill Lowry, has begun to review of the 38 grant applications that we've received and is meeting soon to select recipients of the $50,000 in available funding. It's not too late to jump in if you'd like to participate. Just touch base with Bob, or I think Kelly, and she can get you set up. We've locked in our 3 Fridays at Kroger for bell ringing. So it's going to be Friday, the 6th of December, the 13th of December, and the 20th of December from 3 to 7, just like last year. Look for a link in next week's newsletter to begin signing up. So that's something I know a lot of us all look forward to. We get to do it in a heated vestibule now. So we're not out on the street corner.
That's so nice.
It really is a fun thing to do, and it actually I like it because it's in my old neighborhood too. So I see a lot of old neighbors coming and going through that Kroger. There are also volunteer opportunities at the Radiothon on Saturday, the 14th of December, and at Coats for Kids at the Indiana State Fairgrounds on 11/2. So that one's coming up pretty soon. If you want to participate in Coats for Kids. Be sure to mark your calendars for these upcoming events. Saturday, October 26th, an Abe Lincoln Committee meeting. If you missed our lunch with Alex Core and Graham Honecker about their book, A Blessing, Not a Burden, you're welcome to attend a session at 9 a.m. on Sunday, November 3rd at Second Presbyterian Church, 7700 North Meridian Street. Lunch Bunch is meeting at Iozo's again on the 18th of November. And on December 12th, there'll be a Zoom meeting with the Hoosier Lottery. Chuck, do you want to touch base on the football awards?
Yeah, sure. Be happy to. So we had an excellent meeting last week with the Colts group, and our 68th annual Marion County High School Football Awards banquet is Thursday, December 5th. And we've got 16 county teams and 15 city teams we've invited. This year, we also are including representation from the 16 teams in the Colts Girls Flag Football League, which is really taking off. And if any of you have children or grandchildren like I do that are involved in flag football, it's really getting big. It's a lot of fun to watch. And so we've got, gosh, how many, Kelly? 8 tables of girls' flag in this banquet this year. So that's really a fun thing that we're adding this year for the first time. So we have our banquet for those that are new to our meeting today at the Colts facility, the Gridiron Hall out on 56th Street, which is really a special place. Team table sponsors are available for $200, including one ticket. So if you want to sponsor a team or sponsor a table and a school, it's a great opportunity. So get your tickets for that, and it's a lot of fun. And we honor
Excellent.
a lot of kids. Hopefully this year will be between, what did we decide, Bill, Bill and Roger? Maybe 350
or something like that.
Yeah, maybe 350 kids. So it's always a great turnout. And we've got some special events, special speakers, giveaways, all kinds of neat stuff for the kids.
Excellent. Well, sign me up for the Lawrence Central table if they're
Lawrence
going to be
Central?
participating.
You
Yeah.
got it. Okay, Eric, thank you.
All right. Okay. Any other announcements from the group? Okay.
Other than I see a couple of other guests, Eric.
Oh, you want to, yeah, welcome the guests.
Yeah. Can you guests please introduce yourselves and where you're from? Kathy?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Ridley Merriweather. I am the Communication Outreach Manager for the Komen Tissue Bank and the biobanking group that houses the Komen Tissue Bank. And we are over at the IU Simon Comprehensive Cancer Center. We are focused on making breast cancer go away through several different ways and other cancers as well. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Great.
Vida? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, it's Vidya.
Vidya.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So I'm Vidya. I work as a clinical research coordinator here at the KTB, and Tracy is my office mate, where I'm trying to unblur myself to show her she's in the back. And yeah, I work here. I participate in recruiting minority population for our research studies. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome.
Any other guests? Ms. Schroeder?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Penny Schroeder. I'm with Varsity Blood Center of Indiana. I'm a newer Kiwanis member, so just joining the meeting a little late today. Apologies.
No problem.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think that's
I'm
it.
almost due for my blood donation again, so I'll be down the street.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers today. So I'd like to welcome Michelle Cote and Kathy Ridley Merriweather, who you just heard from. Dr. Cote is director of the Susan G. Komen Tissue Bank, a tenured professor at IU in the Fairbanks School of Public Health, and a scientific member of the Cancer Prevention and Control Program at Indiana University Melvin and Bren Simon Comprehensive Cancer Center. She worked for more than 20 years at Wayne State University and received her undergrad at Michigan. Excuse me. I'll try not to hold that against her as an Illinois grad. Dr. Ridley Merriweather is Communication, Recruitment, and Outreach Manager for the Komen Tissue Bank. She's a graduate of Arlington Tech and IU, Indianapolis. So with that, if you want to start, Dr. Cote, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And thank you for the invitation to come in and talk about the work we do at the Komen Tissue Bank as well as a little bit of information on breast cancer, being that it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, as I'm sure you see pretty much everywhere you go. I did prepare just a small number of slides. I think there's 14 here. I'm going to talk through the first couple and then Kathy will pick up the next few. However, when I share my screen, I am not going to be able to see any of you. So if you have questions or anything like that, you can either put them in the chat, or maybe Kathy, you will make me aware that people want me to slow down or go backwards. So give me 1 second to share my screen with you all. As soon as I do that, my presentation goes backwards. Try that one more time. I will share first. Beginning. Okay. Are you just seeing one big slide?
Nope, you just switched back to your presentation mode.
Okay.
I mean, you just switched back to your notes. We had it at the beginning. There you go.
There. Okay. Well, I did this yesterday and it was exactly opposite yesterday. So that's always fun. And now today I can see you guys. So maybe that's the difference between Zoom and Teams. Anyway, we introduced ourselves. I am an epidemiologist, much like Tracy is, which means I study populations and people, or I study what we call biospecimens that come from people. So I am a PhD scientist. I am not an MD. I'm going to present a little bit of information. All of it it's freely available from the American Cancer Society. But again, I'm not a medical doctor. Always the best idea is to go and to talk to your family medicine or primary care physician, if you have any questions or concerns, because they know a lot more about your health than I do. So with that disclaimer, I'm going to give you a few statistics because that is also what epidemiologists do. We describe the distribution and the determinants of diseases in populations. That's kind of one of the fundamental definitions of epidemiology. And so every year, the American Cancer Society updates their estimates for all different types of cancers. Breast cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer among women in the United States, and in fact, in most of the world, this is true. We think of breast cancers really roughly in kind of two different buckets. And the first is the more serious bucket, and that's where you have over 300,000 new cases a year. That's invasive breast cancer. We think that those are the kinds of breast cancer that are more aggressive and that can metastasize. And by metastasize, we just mean move to different areas. And so, breast cancer in and of itself, if it is confined to the breast, is not what kills people. What kills people is the breast cancer metastases when it goes to the bone or to the lungs or to the brain. So invasive breast cancers are the most kind of common breast cancers that we diagnose. But we do see about 56,000 new cases of what is called ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS. Sometimes you'll hear doctors refer to this as stage 0 breast cancer. Those are types of cancers that they think are less aggressive. But what the question is that nobody's really been able to answer as of yet is whether or not that particular kind of in situ stage 0 cancer will eventually transform and become an invasive breast cancer. So right now, most cases of DCIS are kind of treated just like an early stage, like a stage 1 breast cancer, invasive breast cancer, where you have some type of surgery to remove the tumor, and then usually followed up by some type of radiation. But there's a lot of work in this area trying to kind of figure out like exactly how aggressive are these DCIS cancers going to be. Unfortunately, we have over 40,000 women in the US will die from breast cancer this year. It's the second most deadly type of cancer in women, second only to lung cancer. And while breast cancer death rates have been decreasing steadily for the last 3-4 decades, It isn't necessarily true for all populations. In particular, African American women have not seen these great gains in survival compared to women of other racial and ethnic groups. And so as we were kind of chatting a little bit at the beginning, when you guys were all coming on, you know, breast cancer and other types of cancer happen to individuals, but really it actually happens to families, and families comprise neighborhoods, and neighborhoods comprise communities. So cancer diagnoses really affect everyone, even if you're not, in this case, the 1 in 3 cancer diagnoses in women. Even if that one isn't you, most people, you know, by the time they kind of reach mid-age, know at least one person who's been diagnosed with breast cancer. What are the screening recommendations? And I know that these can be really frustrating because they've changed some over time, depending on what group is making the recommendations. Sometimes they can be a little unclear. I know sometimes about like the age that you should start screening has kind of moved over time. And the big answer to all of this is that you should talk about it with your primary care physician. These recommendations here are only for people who have kind of a usual or typical risk of breast cancer. These recommendations aren't for people who have, like, say, a first-degree relative, a mother, a sibling, a child with breast cancer. These would not be the recommendations. They would be different. But overall, depending on your age, starting somewhere around the age of 40, there's a recommendation to start annual screening. And then as a woman ages, the screening can perhaps become a little less frequent. Again, depending on kind of what the findings of all of those prior things are. But the last bullet point here of what women should understand about what to expect when getting a mammogram, what the test can and can't do. So this is really early detection. We're not really preventing breast cancer. We're just trying to detect it early. We also know that for certain groups of women, women with very dense breasts, for example, and now if you get a mammogram in the state of Indiana, you get a little sheet of paper afterwards, a week or two later, telling you your mammogram was normal. Now it's going to tell you that whether or not you have dense breasts. And we know that mammograms are not as successful at identifying changes that could potentially be cancerous in women who have dense breasts. So mammograms aren't perfect. They're not going to detect everything. And that's why it is particularly important to continue to follow a screening schedule, so that, maybe a different view or a slightly different angle the next year might identify something that wasn't identified earlier. And fortunately, a lot of these tumors are really slow growing. So it gives you the multiple opportunities to detect a cancer. I'll talk a little tiny bit about another reason why we are seeing those decreases in breast cancer mortality rates. So some of them is early detection. The mammograms are getting better. We have ultrasound now. We've got MRIs. All of those different imaging modalities are becoming more and more adept at being able to identify these cancers. But the other part is kind of personalized medicine and some of the new therapies. So just 20 years ago, if you were diagnosed with breast cancer, you maybe had 2 or 3 pieces of information about the tumor. You knew whether your tumor had estrogen receptors on it or progesterone receptors. And they talk about these tumors being hormone receptor positive. And then there's another growth factor called HER2. And you would know, starting in maybe the mid-1980s, whether or not you had a HER2 positive or negative cancer. And around that time, there became a targeted therapy for HER2. So if you were your tumor was HER2 positive, you would have additional therapy beyond the primary treatment. So that was just within 20 years. In 2011, a new test came out, and again, this is looking at the tumor, not looking at anything you inherited from your parents. This is just looking at the tumor, and the test is called Oncotype DX. I think there's a couple other companies now, but this is probably the most standard one still. And what this does is it analyzes 21 different genes and it looks at how the tumor is expressing these genes. And then it kind of gives you a ranking from 0 to 100 about what your risk score is for having a breast cancer recur. And so this test is really only used for small, very small tumors, stage 1, that are the ER/PR positive and the HER2 negative. But it gives a woman an idea about what her risk of recurrence is and whether or not she would benefit from chemotherapy. So this has resulted in hundreds of thousands of women who used to get chemotherapy not having to go through that treatment because their risk of recurrence was shown by the Oncotype DX to be very, very low. So that was 2011. And now I'm going to show you an absolutely crazy pie chart of, and this isn't even all of them. This was just kind of the most representative one I can see, I could find. These are all the different types of mutations that they've identified in breast tumors that they've developed some targeted therapies towards. Some of these targeted therapies come from, the breast cancer research. Some of them come from other cancers you wouldn't even think are related to breast cancer, like things like kidney cancer. So I talk to people when they ask about, breast cancer research and, well, I don't want to donate to Komen because that's only breast cancer. And there's so many other types of breast cancer or other types of cancer, not just breast cancer. And while that's very true, breast cancer is a great model for a bunch of other types of cancer. And because it is so much more common, we can do things like clinical trials faster than we could with cancer types that are rarer. And so many of these cancer drugs are kind of used off-label, so to speak, across multiple cancer types. So this is how much more complex our understanding is of the actual tumor. And that leads me kind of to my final slide here, and then we'll take it into Kathy's part. There's a lot you can do to prevent cancer and to detect it early when a cure is more likely. These treatments are becoming much more personalized. I've heard, I've had family members will come to me and say, I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. I've been diagnosed with some other cancer. Oh, my doctor said it's just a cookie cutter type of breast cancer. And I tell them all, nobody is a cookie here. Your breast cancer is your breast cancer, and it's as unique to you and your health history as it is to anything else. It's not a cookie cutter. So I always suggest to people, if they are even the littlest bit hesitant about their care, about their comfort level with their clinician, to think about seeking a second opinion. And, doctors should actually really support you in this. They should not be angry. I mean, what we do here at Indiana University at the Simon Cancer Center is done in a lot of places, but we work in multidisciplinary teams. So you might have a primary doctor that you're meeting with, but that doctor is meeting with all of the other doctors on this team, and they're discussing your case and they're discussing the treatment options, and they have social workers and they have nurses and they have oftentimes cardiologists are involved in the care. So think about a second opinion. You don't have to get one, but it's always something to consider. And the very last thing I have on here, and Kathy will laugh because I recommend this all the time. If you guys are at all interested in kind of cancer research, maybe how things happen in this world, check out, this was a PBS special. Jim Allison is a researcher. He was, for most of his career, I think, down at MD Anderson in Texas. I will say the language is a little bit spicy. He is not your typical researcher. He's got a bit of a potty mouth. So this breakthrough special talks about the development of an immunotherapy drug that was initially used in people with metastatic melanoma. So that's a very serious, oftentimes deadly type of skin cancer. And I can say I've seen it in my own circle. My dad's best friend went from he's had 7 different invasive like melanomas over the course of his life, but the last one was metastatic at diagnosis. And he went from desperately ill on the couch, sleeping for 20 hours a day, to up and around. He's 80 years old. He still has a part-time job. And it is based on this drug. And there's a couple of other stories of this, as well as kind of the story of kind of the dance that he did, Jim Allison did, with the drug company to develop this compound. It was actually, the initial findings were developed due to a laboratory accident. The lab tech who was supposed to come in and kill the mice in the experiment, he never showed up over breaks. So the mice lived longer. And that was what they realized, was that they needed a longer time to be able to, to watch this treatment work in these mice. So anyways, that's I get zero money for this. But the Jim Allison breakthrough, I think is a fantastic piece of work. So, all right. That's my section is over. Anybody have any questions for me? And before we pass it to Kathy?
I do have a quick question. I've been curious as to whether artificial intelligence is playing much of a role in the research or in the breast cancer detection.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I guess it depends how you define artificial intelligence versus machine learning and all of that.
Mhm.
But there's probably for at least a decade now, a lot of places run all of their mammograms through what I would consider like a machine learning or machine assisted scan that identifies regions that the machine has been trained to think look suspicious. And it'll actually circle them. So then the radiologist can go back and look in a little more detail at that area. So a lot of places run their mammograms through some sort of like one software, it's called Cumulus. They'll run it through kind of just a predictive program. So it is being used for sure, with I'm certain more to come.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, Kathy, you just get to tell me next slide, okay?
Okay, will do. All right, here we go. So, just before we start, like Michelle, I am a PhD, not an MD. Unlike Michelle, I can barely even spell epidemiology. Look at that. I just stumbled over saying it. I am a health communication scholar. And so I focus on I focus on all things related to your communication practices and norms about health, but it's a very wide field. And my particular focus is the inclusion and recruitment of Black and Brown people into cancer clinical trials. And so I am going to tell you a little bit about the Komen Tissue Bank itself. First of all, I'm going to make sure that we understand why it's called the Komen Tissue Bank. Most people are familiar with Susan G. Komen, which the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. And that is the same Komen. However, we are not Komen. We are very grateful to the Komen Foundation, however, because 17 years ago, when nobody believed in what became the Komen Tissue Bank, they gave us money to move forward. And so we are really fully Indiana University. Whoa, my power just went out. Whoa.
You're still here and we
I
can
am?
still hear you. Yep.
Okay, my screen just went dark and everything. So we are really but I'm an actress, so we can get through this. You just have to tell me what slide is up, Michelle. So the Komen Tissue Bank, and I may not be following these bullet points that were up there because, hey, I can't see them anymore. What the heck happened to my screen? Anyway, so the Komen Tissue Bank is the only biobank in the world that collects healthy breast tissue for breast cancer research. We are a clinical trial. We are a very unique clinical trial, but we are indeed a clinical trial. And we were founded, like I said, I might not have said this actual thing, but in 2007. And so at the beginning, many were a little bit hesitant to understand that The Komen Tissue Bank is the only biobank in the world that collects healthy breast tissue for breast cancer research, which means that people without breast cancer, people with no signs of breast cancer, who really could go on about their day and never even dream of coming in for a voluntary biopsy procedure, indeed do volunteer to come in and donate their healthy breast tissue to the Komen Tissue Bank. We then take excellent care of that tissue. We assign your medical history to it. We store it very carefully, and we make it available to breast cancer researchers around the world who use it usually as normal controls in their breast cancer research. In other words, they use it as examples of what normal breast tissue looks like so that they can then be more effective in studying how breast cancer might develop in different groups of people in certain ways. And so we are a clinical trial, like I said. We are dependent upon people understanding that it's so very important to participate in research. Next slide for the people who can actually see the slides, I think. Did I talk about everything on that slide? And are you guys still there?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah,
Oh,
I think
okay.
you covered it. So
Okay.
now it's what happens at a tissue collection event.
Okay, great. So what
Sorry.
happens at a tissue collection event? So here we go. First of all, in order to collect people's healthy breast tissue, we have events. We have all-day events. We just had one Saturday. It was Saturday. It was amazing Saturday, and it's always amazing to watch to be witness to this wonderful happenings. So the event is held all day. You People come and they actually get an appointment beforehand to come, and when they arrive they begin a 7 station. The donors go through 7 stations. The first station is check-in, where you're greeted, you're given a bottle of water, you're then escorted. You're escorted everywhere you go. The next station that you go to is informed consent. Informed consent is extremely important. It is the reason why research in general is so much safer today than it ever has been. And so after you are sitting with a consenter and you fully understand what you're agreeing to, then you give your informed consent, and then you're taken over to height and weight so you can be weighed and measured. Often the least favorite part of this whole process, especially for women. I literally saw one woman who was there one time with her boyfriend, and he was following her around and going with her to every station, and she made him face the wall. So he looked like he was a very, very grown man in timeout over there by the scales. But we do weigh you, measure you, and then we write it down on a little card for you, and you take that over to the questionnaire area. At questionnaire, you fill out a pretty detailed medical information questionnaire, which is quite important because it's that questionnaire that when the researchers request tissue, that questionnaire data is sent along with your tissue to the researchers so they can know about your medical history, which will definitely help to inform their research. So after you've completed your questionnaire, you go and you donate 3 small vials of blood. And then after that, you go and you donate your oh, you guys are back. How exciting. You go and you donate your healthy breast tissue in a room, we take over a clinic. I'm sorry, I forgot that, but we take over a clinic at the cancer center. We take over a clinic that has about 24 to 26 exam rooms, and we use about 18 of those for our events. And when you do give these samples, when you do give your blood and your tissue, it is as soon as they leave your body, they are raced. We have a pop-up laboratory. Our protocol states that we have to process these samples within 5 minutes of leaving your body, which is too soon for it to be run 2 or 3 buildings away where our actual lab is. So we have a pop-up lab that takes over 2 or 3 more of the exam rooms, and we are ready to process your samples right there. After you've donated your tissue, women, and we do take tissue from men. I'll go into that a little bit more later if you have questions, but we take tissue from men and women. For women, they're given, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you more about the actual procedure too, if you're interested. I won't go into that if you're not really, it's a biopsy procedure. I'll say
Yeah,
that.
I'm curious about it. Yeah.
Okay, then let me go ahead and tell you the details of that because that's usually a very important thing to know about. So the actual tissue donation, the consent, and the questionnaire are the three areas of the seven that will take up the majority of your time as a donor. If you are donating tissue, you can expect to take about 70 to 90 minutes from getting out of your car to getting back into your car. And depending upon, for example, how many questions you might ask at consenting, at questionnaire, I fully believe, although I have not done any quantitative work on this, I fully believe that the time that it takes you to complete your questionnaire is directly correlative to how old you are and how difficult it might be to remember a lot of the things that happened early in your life. And then when you're donating the tissue, that is the next thing. It takes about 20 minutes to actually donate your tissue. First, the area is cleaned, and then you are numbed with lidocaine, and then we make a very small nick of an incision. And then we, with the assistance of a machine that uses vacuum and air, we insert the needle and it removes the tissue out. It goes in once and comes out and then comes out. We take 5 to 7 cores, cores maybe the size of a pencil lead. We take 5 to 7 cores of your tissue, and then then very firm pressure is held on the area of the incision for 10 minutes. Regardless of how long it took you to stop bleeding, we hold for 10 minutes or longer if you haven't stopped bleeding by then, but the vast majority of people have stopped bleeding by then. And then after that, we put a little sticky steri strip over your incision. We put gauze over that. We give you an ice pack. And the ice pack goes immediately up against that gauze. If you are female and you're wearing a bra, we just tuck it inside your bra and use that to hold it on you. If you are male or you don't wear a bra, we will wrap you with a little ace bandage. And then I always encourage everybody to keep icing on and off the rest of the evening. And then you go off to check out the 7th station where you get all the important information that you might need to know. You also get a parking pass and you get a t-shirt, and that is all you get for, and the joy of having participated in medical research and knowing that you are protecting your legacy by enabling treatments to happen and to be discovered that we don't yet have. And then you skip merrily away because you're so happy at having done this. You go back to your car and you're floating on air for quite a bit of time afterwards. Any questions about that procedure of donating tissue at all?
Do you just take the biopsy from one breast or from both?
Just from one. For women, it's usually taken from the upper outer quadrant of the breast, but we don't usually, okay, I have to stand up because it's impossible not to do this demonstrating. So if you divide your breast into quarters, we take it from here, but we don't usually go in from here. They'll usually go in from underneath, but they're aiming for this quadrant. For some reason, scientists have determined that that is the area that might have the most cellularity. For men, we take it much closer to the front, closer to the nipple, because that's where they have more tissue usually.
And how do you get your volunteers? You got to advertise for them somehow. Do you use the people who get their breast mammograms at IU, or how do you do that?
We do not. And so actually, so my job is to recruit the Black and Brown, the underserved populations. So now that includes Black and Brown people of any gender, young people of any gender, and then Black and Brown people and by that, and I'm including any non-white persons into that. And then men as well, I'm responsible for recruiting. We do, and so those are the only groups we recruit. So who does that leave? We do not actually recruit white women over the age of 50 or 55. They are welcome to donate. Their tissue is valuable as well, but we have a lot of it. And we don't have to recruit them. They come. They feel safe and they come. The groups that I focus on either need more education about why we need them, or they have very valid fears and hesitancies about participation in research. So I often get a question from white women, can I come? I only hear you talking about Black and brown people. It's like, absolutely, but I don't need it's just a word of mouth, general public kind of a thing. We do have, and then you're going to get an opportunity to look at this in a couple of slides. We do have a list of people who are interested in donating their tissue, and we reach out to them before any tissue collection event. We do use social media and like that. We do not recruit through mammograms, but hot diggity, that is a good idea that I would have to look at a little bit further. And then, but because of what I do, it's not near, it's basically, it's just not very, people like me, black and brown women, men, are, and often young people, and by young, we kind of mean childbearing age, we under 40. Um, Definitely Black and brown people are just not going to get up and come in to donate their tissue because somebody told us it's something we should do. We need a lot more information. We need time. We need all kinds of things. That is part of my study that is ongoing for me. And so broad recruitment doesn't work. It's just ineffective. So I do a lot of community outreach. We are out at festivals and fairs all through from spring, summer, and the early fall. I am in churches. I am with social groups. I'm talking to groups like this one. The members of the Kiwanis Club altogether may not be a particular target group of people that I'm necessarily looking at all the time, but people have daughters and granddaughters and sons and husbands and things like that. And so the recruitment was usually very targeted recruitment that is considered to be more effective than any type of mass recruitment efforts.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a little bit more about that questionnaire. That questionnaire, like I said, it is very important. It is collecting information that we know that researchers need. And the reason we know researchers need it is because they let us know what they need. And it is a morphing document. It is a changing document. We have recently changed and actually removed a lot of the questions that we were asking and added some other questions that we were not asking before. And that's based on what we're hearing from researchers. And so here are some those the first group that was up there is our baseline group. Everybody sitting down to complete this questionnaire is might / is going to have some information to do here. And this is information that we don't necessarily revisit later on. However, the Komen Tissue Bank is a longitudinal study. That means that we are going to touch base with you once a year to get updates on particular factors of your health that are listed there. So you're going to get an email for this very short follow-up. If your answer is no to all the questions, it literally takes maybe 2 minutes. If your answer is yes to any of the questions, have you been pregnant since last year? Have you developed any cancers? Have you developed any other more common issues? If your answer is yes to any of those, it might take you a little bit longer, maybe 5 minutes, because it'll trigger a couple of follow-up questions. But in this manner, someone who requests your tissue, a researcher who requests your tissue, and you might have donated 8 years ago, now a researcher has your tissue and they have your questionnaire from 8 years ago, but they also have a nice current up-to-date addendum to your medical history. Next slide, unless there's any questions. Okay, so when you come and donate your tissue, that one donation produces many, many, many different types and forms of specimens that can fund or that can be used for several different projects. So here's just a diagram that shows you. So we take your blood, and then we also, from that, we can, of course, get your DNA. That blood, we spin it down into serum. It separates serum and plasma. Sometimes we cryopreserve the breast tissue, and that means that cell lines can be grown from it later on. And then the tissue that is frozen, we keep some of it in a -80-degree freezer, and we keep some of it in liquid nitrogen tanks. So it's frozen at different levels. And then we also keep some of it at room temperature in a fixed FFPE block on a slide. And researchers can ask for any and or all of these forms for their research. Sometimes they might want your tissue and your blood. Sometimes they just want blood. I mean, it could be anything at all that they might request from us that we make available to them. Next slide. And we have researchers that are around the world. We have sent samples to England, to Australia. I think we've sent some to Africa. Or am I thinking that maybe we were going to and that didn't happen? But there's some great numbers of the different projects, 189, how many different institutions, how many actual specimens that we have sent out. To date, over 5,000 people have donated their tissue, which is really wonderful. And then you have this great bar graph that goes back to 2010. And all of those different types of samples that I told you about in the previous slide, they're all color-coded here. And you can see, interestingly, for example, in 2021, DNA was very popular. Now we know what was going on in 2020 and 2021. We were all at home for COVID, the pandemic, but researchers, many were in their labs, and our samples were flying out the door. Our biospecimen manager was in the office quite often, packing up and shipping out samples during the pandemic. Yes. Somebody. Oh, Tom is talking. So any questions about this slide at all? Okay, next slide. So I want to give you some facts about breast cancer that everyone should know. Some people know a lot about breast cancer, some people do not. Breast cancer affects us differently based on our race and ethnicity and gender. Black women, for example, are 20% more likely to develop a particularly aggressive form of breast cancer called triple-negative breast cancer. So if you remember back several slides, one of Michelle's slides, she talked to you about ER-positive breast cancer and PR-positive breast cancer and HER2 breast cancer. Those are all the types of breast cancer that we've identified. We have many, many treatments for those types of breast cancers. One or two of them are have such effective treatment options that I've heard more than one breast oncologist call it the good breast cancer because it is so treatable. Triple negative breast cancer is when we cannot blame any of those protein markers. We cannot, none of them have gone wonky. This is my scientific language here. So when when we don't know what is actually causing the breast cancer, it is more difficult to treat. And when all of those receptors are negative, and we call it triple negative breast cancer, now we can still treat it, but we don't have a targeted treatment for it. We don't have a treatment that's been made specifically for it, and we know how that treatment is going to work. And this is much more aggressive. Black women are 20% more likely to develop it. And partly because of that, Black women are 40% more likely to die from breast cancer than their white counterparts. Next bullet. Latinas trend toward developing breast cancer at an earlier age. Many Latinas are developing breast cancer before their insurance will even pay for them to have a mammogram. Also, young Latinas also have a higher likelihood of developing that same triple negative breast cancer. Next bullet. Asian women Asian women do enjoy a somewhat lower risk of breast cancer. They certainly develop it, but their risk is lower. However, it's lower as long as they are still in the countries, if they are not from the United States, in their home countries. When they move to the United States, their risk rate rises to such a degree that after a period of a couple of decades, and certainly their children, if they are born here, they have pretty much lost whatever protection they had in their home countries. Now, Asian is a huge category. It should, of course, be disaggregated to really speak in specifics. So anything you hear from me about Asian populations or Asian women has to do with things that are pretty common to the majority of the Asian populations that can be, large numbers can be found here in the United States.
Do you think that's because of diet changes?
So
The American diet?
we don't know, but I can't imagine that is not a factor, right? The environment, the diet, all kinds of things like that. One, as far as why it rises, but there's another factor of why it might be why their cancers might be diagnosed at a later stage. And this has to do, my research has found that because of many to most Asian populations have a very large, strong, ingrained culture of privacy. So whereas we might go around telling our family members and our church members and our club members that we have cancer and we're looking for we might look to them for support, and we don't experience the stigma. In Asian populations, there is often stigma attached to a diagnosis, so they don't talk about it, to the point that I have met Asian women who did not know their mother died of breast cancer, did not know their best friends themselves were survivors. There is a definite culture difference there that really increases also their willingness and ability to go get checked out when they do suspect that something is wrong. Men do get breast cancer. Men develop breast cancer. 1 in every 721 men develop breast cancer, compared to 1 in 8 women. So it is considered rare, but let me give you a little visual of what 1 in 721 men might look like. I don't know if anybody's been, my husband and I had season tickets to the Fever, Go Fever. And so if anybody's been in Gainbridge Fieldhouse, there's about 20-ish, 22-ish sections there at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. If Gainbridge was full of men, 1 man in every one of those sections is going to develop breast cancer. So I wouldn't want to be that man. So yes, it's rare, but it definitely happens more than you might think. And it's and for the purposes of breast cancer research, men are definitely understudied. Treatments for breast cancer are made for older white women, because that's who is in the clinical trials that inform these treatments. Anybody who is not a 50 or older white woman, the treatments are not made for them, and the treatments behave differently. Black and brown people get much more aggressive side effects. Men who really get the ER positive breast cancer, the men get 90% of male breast cancer is estrogen receptor positive. ER positive. That's the one that I told you that we have so many treatments for. But guess what? We actually have a fabulous researcher at IU who works a lot in men's breast cancer. And I get a lot of, we have one-on-ones quite often so that he can continue to educate me. And those treatments for that ER positive breast cancer do not work in men like like they do in women. And so it's important that we study men. Young people get breast cancer. You
So,
can go ahead and click the next one, Michelle, too.
so do men get mammograms, or how do you detect it in men?
Yeah. So no, not as a common practice, Eric, but and I'm going to try not to get on an insurance rant here, but if a man has, for example, two female blood relatives with breast cancer and maybe another male relative with prostate cancer, he should go get tested.
Hmm.
Prostate, pancreatic cancer. What am I missing, Michelle? And another cancer, ovarian cancer and breast cancer. Those four cancers are very related, and can be indications of each other. And so, Eric, the main thing about male breast cancer is they pretty much get the same symptoms of breast cancer that women get, but they are not as likely to understand what that symptom means. So a lump in the chest area could be an ingrown hair. It could be
Mhm.
a small cyst. It could be I was working in the garage and I banged up against, that my tool chest, and this could be just a hematoma. Especially a rash on the outside of the breast is a symptom of breast cancer. All the same kind of thought processes that stop them from going to get checked out. So when they do finally get diagnosed, it is usually at a much later stage and therefore
Okay.
harder to treat. And then to close this out, young people definitely do get breast cancer, and their risk rate is also rising. And so it is very important that they also do not ignore those symptoms, just because they're young. Okay, here's a slide I told you was coming up. So if you would like to donate your tissue to the Komen Tissue Bank in the future, or if you are interested in volunteering at one of our events, it's a great service project for groups to volunteer at our events. And like I said, it's a great day. So those all-day events take about 120 people to run them, and the Komen Tissue Bank has about 8 employees. So we are very dependent upon volunteers. All the surgeons, all of the lab techs, all of the phlebotomists, consenters, all those people are volunteers. And then about half of the volunteers are just lay people who just love helping others. The volunteer day is a lot longer than a tissue donor day. It's from like 7:30 a.m. to maybe 3:30 p.m. But scan either one of these, you'll just be taken to a very quick registration. And once you've done that, you'll start getting emails from us when we're having events, which is only once a year now that it's going forward is only going to be once a year in town, maybe twice. So we're not going to be flooding you with emails, but you will get an email saying, hey, we're having an event. Do you want to volunteer? Hey, we're having an event. Do you want to donate? And then we just want to thank you so much. These are our funders, our supporters. That is a little bit of a dated version of our crew, although all of those people still work with us, if not directly for the Komen Tissue Bank. And Michelle and I are just very happy to answer any other questions you might have. And again, we thank you for having us here today.
I have a question and a couple of comments. My name is Trent Cow. So yeah, thanks for doing this. Could you show the slide again on the documentary that you mentioned? I was about to write that down. I got cut off.
Jim Allison's Breakthrough. And the reason she said I'm going to laugh is that it's just, I went home and watched it. We had a social media trend. We were having everybody suggest their favorite science-oriented movie. And so Michelle suggested this one, and I've been raving about it ever since as well. It is awesome.
That's great. Yeah, we're fortunate to have the Simon Cancer Center here. As you mentioned, it affects every family or everyone that's been affected. I've had family members that didn't survive cancer 20 to 30 years ago. And if they had it today, they probably would. It's amazing that the people that go to Simon Cancer Center and they're able to treat it and survive and live good lives after that. I think it'd be great for a lot of our members to get that DNA sample cryogenically frozen so we could clone a few of these people, like Roger, Tom Dunham, Mary Bulk, everybody on this call. We need to clone these Kiwanis people for the future, save that DNA. So my two quick questions are, you hear a lot about artificial intelligence, and it's kind of fuzzy term. We don't know how it really impacts things, but I've heard it really accelerates drug discovery and research. And do you see the benefits of AI affecting your research and progress? And then the second one, there were a few years ago, there were a lot of studies about alcohol, like a few glasses of wine a day was actually good for you. The more I read now is the optimal alcohol intake is zero, basically, that it is not healthy. So those were my two questions, and overall, keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll say, I talked a little bit about the use of, and I'm always hesitant to call it artificial intelligence versus machine learning versus whatever, because the people who are really involved in that field get really touchy about exactly the language you use. But yeah, I mean, it's been used already for screening mammograms and helping physicians look for areas that are suspicious that maybe the human eye doesn't capture. They're using the same in pathology now. So once a biopsy is taken, they put it on a slide, they can digitize that slide. And the cool things about that are many. Like one, then you can feed it into a machine that can start using this for algorithms. The guy they just hired, well, just maybe a year and a half ago, his name's Mike Feldman. He's the chair of pathology here at IU Indianapolis. This has been his research. He's a pathologist. How do you make the diagnoses more accurate and better? I mean, it's scary to hear, but there is a lot of differences between pathologists and what they call. And that goes back to my get a second opinion if you're at all unsure, because if you have two people who disagree, they will bring it to a third person, a fourth person, and before they come to consensus. You always want more people looking at things. But yeah, machine learning is absolutely the wave of the future. He was actually a breast oncologist here. His name was George Sledge. He went from here to Stanford, and now he is the head of Caris Life Sciences, like from there. He's like their scientific director. And what that is that's all personalized medicine. And it's looking at, hundreds of thousands of tumors from hospitals all over the country. He came here last week and presented. And one thing that was really cool is about 5% of cancers, we don't actually know where their primary origin is. We don't know where that cancer came from. So we find it in the bone. We know it's not a bone cancer, but we can't tell you, did it come from breast? Did it come from kidney? Where did it come from? A lot of stuff metastasizes from the bone. They're able to use their hundreds of thousands of genetic profiles to say, hey, we think this looks like this type of primary. And, it's absolutely incredible. But the thing he said that really stuck with me is we know where we're going to be 10 years from now. We don't know how we're going to get there. So it's going to be a different world for personalized medicine based on what they're doing with AI and all of that. The second question was about alcohol. And yes, I am here and I am sad to tell you that alcohol use does appear to not have any sort of benefits, especially with respect to cancer. And we've known for a long time, liver cancer is highly associated with alcohol use. A lot of your head and neck cancers, your mouth cancers, especially if you smoke, there's a synergistic effect. But even breast cancer, and why you see some of these studies go back and forth, it's fine, it's not, it's this, is it really has to do with what the window of susceptibility is. So when we do our epidemiologic studies, we ask about what you were doing 5 years ago, or even a year ago. Frankly, none of that probably matters in terms of cancer. What we need to do is we need to figure out what you were doing 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Or like for women with breast cancer, they actually think and this is really depressing, it's alcohol use up until your first age at first childbirth. So there's protective effect of having children, at least for breast cancer. And they think that the kind of window of susceptibility is that time period leading up to first birth. And we don't have a good way of assessing that in people, and same thing with diet. I mean, I can't remember what my diet was like 20 or 30 years ago, and that was probably an important period. So it's a lot of work to be done, but yes, alcohol, at least right now in the literature, is a no-go, increases risk.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both for your presentation. This has really been informative and I think helpful for all of us to know. The Kiwanis Club is going to make a donation in your honor to support Girls Indianapolis. They collect and distribute essential items, including bras, underwear, and menstrual hygiene products, allowing those experiencing homelessness, impoverishment, or distress to stand tall with dignity. So thanks again for your presentation.
We love you.
My AUL sign of wisdom closing today is there are no early risers in Athens because dawn is tough on Greece. So there you go.
Good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.